Carlyle sighed as he turned off the car motor, staring blankly at the house. The girls were all out for the day, and Edward was with Bella. That left only Jasper and Emmett, who,
Yeah! Yes!
if the whoops and shrieks and crashes from the backyard were any indication, were otherwise engaged. He ran a hand over his face shakily. For once, he was glad to be met with an empty house. A glance at the clock in the car showed that he had been sitting there for 10 minutes already. 10 minutes. That's how long she lived once she got to the hospital. The beeping of the machines as she flatlined rang in his ears tauntingly, as if saying, "Look what you've done! Look how you failed!" He got out of the car after a while. He let himself into the house quietly as to not alert Jasper and Emmett, and hung his coat up on his hook by the door. He paused a moment as he surveyed the hooks lined up next to his, a faint smile finding its way to his face as the gleeful shrieks from outside reached his ears and a familiar warmth filled him at the thought of his family. It faded fast, however, as he remembered with a sharp pang the parents who wouldn't be permitted to enjoy the luxury of hearing their children play together. He sighed again, an ache settling in his chest as he walked mechanically to the kitchen table and set his bag on it before he sank down into a chair, his legs unable to hold him any longer. She had been 9. There was a horrible accident. A patch of ice. A drunk driver. And she passed away 10 minutes after the ambulance rushed her to the hospital. In the middle of the surgery. Her parents and brother were lucky enough to survive. Perhaps that was the wrong word. He knew were he in their place, he would not consider himself lucky to have to carry on after losing a child. The screen door in the back slammed shut, letting in the sounds of teasing and laughing. "Carlisle, you're home early," Jasper commented as he entered the kitchen, a laugh still lingering in his voice. The older vampire tried his best to school his features into something less conflicted. "Yes, I suppose I am," he said quietly, looking down at his hands. Jasper stopped in his tracks, his face creasing in concern. "You okay?" he asked. Carlisle made a half-hearted attempt to draw another emotion to mind to try and shield Jasper from him, and opened his mouth to respond with some lie, but the words died in his mouth. 2 arms wrapped around him from behind and gave him a squeeze. "I'm fine," he murmured after a moment. His hand went up to try and detach the arms, but faltered and came to rest on them instead. His mind drifted back to the little girl and her family. He left before they had regained consciousness, ran like a coward, and he absent-mindedly wondered if they would hate him for not saving her. He knew that he did. There had been a brief, panicked moment where he considered turning her, but it wouldn't be fair. It wasn't fair to anyone who was turned, to take away their lives in exchange for a meaningless, eternal existence. His gaze wandered back to the hooks by the door, and he had sentenced them to that. Jasper gave him another squeeze, grounding him to the present. "What's going on?" he asked. He sounded almost scared, and Carlyle swallowed heavily past the lump that had formed in his throat, a wave of guilt washing over it. "Nothing. I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" Carlyle's head drooped, the weight of his guilt shoving it down. "For everything," he murmured. "That you're condemned to a life you didn't choose, that I condemned others to the same life, knowing the hardships of it." The screen door slammed again. "Jazz!" Emmett called out. "Did you find the basketball?" He faltered when he caught sight of the two vampires at the table. "Is everything okay?" he asked immediately. He was by their side in a flash. Jasper exchanged a glance with him and gave a small shake of his head. Emmett gave a small nod in return. It was ironic that they had their own silent way of communicating when Edward was the one who was a telepath. "You didn't condemn them," Jasper said firmly, turning back to Carlyle. "And I don't feel condemned either, not anymore. Because of your kindness, I have a second chance at life, a chance to learn from mistakes and choose the right side." Carlyle didn't need telepathy to know that the other vampire was thinking back to his time in the Civil War. He gave his arm a gentle squeeze of reassurance. "Yeah," Emmett agreed as he swung a leg over the chair next to him and plopped down. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have anything. I'd literally be dead. I didn't even have a family before. Now I have a beautiful wife, parents, and 3 siblings who are annoying as hell." "I'd better be your favorite," Jasper growled, but there was no real threat behind his voice. Emmett let out a laugh. "Don't let Edward know. He'll mope for weeks," he said with a wink. The chuckle that escaped Carlyle caught in his throat and almost morphed into a sob. His hand instinctively tightened on Jasper's arm, and he ducked his head as he took a shuddering breath, trying to choke back the tears that sprang forth. Emmett and Jasper quieted instantly, and Carlyle could tell that they were worried and oh, how he hated worrying them. Emmett reached across the table and took his hand. Carlyle gripped it like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm fine. I just need a moment." Jasper's head dropped down to his shoulder and he leaned his own head against it, trying to reassure the younger vampire as much as comfort himself. "Did something happen at the hospital?" Emmett asked, showing a rare display of seriousness. Carlyle nodded, not quite trusting himself to speak yet. Emmett nodded as well, not seeming to know what else to do. "Did someone die?" he asked hesitantly. Carlyle nodded again. "She was 9, he whispered. I couldn't." He broke off. Jasper hummed in an understanding way, and Emmett stood and wrapped both of them in a hug. Carlyle squeezed his eyes against the burning tears that spilled out without his permission. "I don't deserve this," he choked out. "I don't deserve any of you." "Wow, I know we're a handful, but I didn't know you felt that way," Emmett teased in a mock offended voice, purposely flipping the self-deprecating sentence around. Carlyle let out a wet laugh. Emmett held them tighter. They stayed like that for a while before Carlyle managed to get his emotions under control again. "I'm alright now," he assured them after a bit. "Really?" Jasper asked, a tone of disbelief in his voice. "Because I know you like to lie about that." A small smile worked its way to Carlyle's face. "I promise," he said. They broke away slowly, almost regretfully. Carlyle sighed and stood from his seat, grabbing his bag off the table with the intention of heading to his office to drown himself in paperwork. When he turned, he was instantly caught in another hug from Emmett, and when Emmett stepped away, he was replaced by Jasper, who gave him a gentler hug. "Thank you, boys," Carlisle said with a genuine smile. The warm feeling had returned, despite the voice in his head telling him that he didn't deserve any of it. "Will you watch us play Mario Kart? Jasper cheats," Emmett said casually, but worry persisted in his eyes. "You're the one that cheats," Jasper accused. Carlo hesitated a moment, glancing down at his bag. Emmett caught his gaze and shared another cryptic look with Jasper before launching into the mechanics of the game and the various ways that he suspected Jasper was cheating while Jasper tried to defend himself. And somewhere along the way, Carlisle's bag disappeared from his hand and appeared back on the table, and he was ushered into the family room to judge the game. After the first round ended, when he attempted to head back to the bag, somehow he ended up on the couch between them with a game controller in his hand. Jasper got first, Emmett got second, Carlisle got 11th, but the joy and peace that Carlisle felt while playing with his boys could never be ranked.